You want me to believe my dead wife is alive, that she's been hiding with our daughter for 5 years while I've been drowning in this whiskey? Not hiding, Nathaniel. Protecting. There is a difference. Protecting from what? From me, I tore the world apart looking for her bones. Marcus, I burned myself on the ashes of our home. If she is out there, if she let me grieve for a ghost, then you go to her and you pray she forgives you for what you're about to do. The scent of roasted chestnuts and damp cobblestones filled the air of the Moonstone Pack's central square. But for Alpha Nathaniel Drake, the world smelled only of ash. It had been 5 years, 5 long, excruciating years since the fire that had gutted the Alpha Manor, taking with it the only thing that had ever made his heart beat with anything other than duty. Vivienne. Nathaniel adjusted the cuffs of his dark gray coat, his movements stiff. At 32, he was in his physical prime, a predator at the top of the food chain. His shoulders were broad enough to carry the weight of the entire pack, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, but his eyes, stormy gray and perpetually shadowed, told the truth. He was a man walking through a life he no longer wanted. Alpha Drake, a vendor murmured, bowing his head as Nathaniel passed. Nathaniel gave a curt nod. He didn't stop. He never stopped. If he stopped, the silence would catch up to him. He walked through the bustling crowd like a wraith, the noise of the market fading into a dull roar in his ears. He was looking for Marcus, his beta, who had insisted on meeting here rather than the office. Suddenly, a small force slammed into his thigh. Nathaniel stumbled slightly, his instincts flaring before he clamped them down. He looked down. A child, a little girl, no older than 6, had tripped over her own shoelaces and barreled straight into him. She scrambled back, looking up with wide, terrified eyes. "I'm sorry," she squeaked, clutching a small, worn plush rabbit to her chest. Nathaniel's breath hitched. Time seemed to warp, slowing down until the noisy market fell silent. The girl had unruly curls the color of spun gold, escaping from beneath a knitted cap, but it was her eyes that froze the blood in Nathaniel's veins. They were mismatched. One was a deep, forest green, the other was a bright, shocking amber. Vivienne's eyes. Nathaniel felt his heart give a painful, stuttering thud against his ribs. It was impossible. He was hallucinating again. He had spent the first year after the fire seeing Vivienne in every crowd, smelling her perfume in every breeze. But this child... The girl tilted her head, confused by the tall, scary man staring at her. As she moved, her hair shifted. There, just behind her right ear, was a birthmark. It was small, distinct, and shaped perfectly like a crescent moon. The air left Nathaniel's lungs in a rush. He knew that mark. It was the Drake family mark, a genetic quirk passed down through the Alpha bloodline for generations. His father had it. He had it. "Who are you?" Nathaniel whispered, his voice cracking. The command of an Alpha was gone, replaced by the desperate plea of a broken man. He reached out, his hand trembling. "Little one, who—" "Isla, come here now." The voice was sharp, panicked, and painfully familiar. Nathaniel's head snapped up. 20 feet away, standing near a stall selling dried herbs, was a figure draped in a heavy, nondescript cloak. The hood was pulled low, but a single lock of blonde hair had fallen loose, catching the weak autumn sunlight. The woman rushed forward, not with the gait of a stranger, but with a specific, fluid grace that Nathaniel had memorized with his hands and lips a lifetime ago. She grabbed the little girl's hand, pulling her back protectively. For a split second, the woman looked up. It was only a glimpse, a pale cheekbone, the curve of a pink mouth that used to whisper his name in the dark. The scent hit him then. It wasn't the smell of the market anymore. It was jasmine, heady, blooming night jasmine mixed with the crisp scent of autumn rain. "Mate!" The wolf inside Nathaniel, dormant and mourning for 5 years, roared to life with a violence that nearly brought him to his knees. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't a dream. "Vivian!" he roared, the name tearing from his throat like a wound opening up. The woman didn't answer. She turned and ran, dragging the child with her, disappearing into the labyrinth of stalls. "No!" Nathaniel surged forward. "Stop. I command you to stop." But the bond was frayed, distant, confused. She didn't obey. She was running from him. He shoved past a startled baker, knocking a tray of bread to the ground. He didn't care. His vision tunneled. All he could see was that cloak, that flash of gold hair. He scrambled over crates, ignoring the shouts of his pack members. "She is alive. She is alive. She is alive." He reached the alleyway where she had turned. It was a dead end. It was empty. Nathaniel spun around, chest heaving, his wolf scratching at the surface of his skin, demanding to be let out to hunt. There was nothing there but a discarded crate and the lingering, haunting scent of jasmine fading into the wind. She was gone, again. 2 hours later, Nathaniel stood in his office at the pack house. The room was a wreck. He had overturned his heavy oak desk in a fit of rage when he returned. Papers were scattered across the floor like snow. Marcus Reed, his beta and best friend, stood near the door, arms crossed, his face unreadable. "You need to calm down, Nate," Marcus said softly. "The patrols are sweeping the perimeter. If she's in the territory, we will find her." "She was here, Marcus." Nathaniel paced, running his hands through his hair, tugging at the roots until it hurt. It wasn't a ghost. It was her. And there was a child. He stopped, turning his burning gaze on his beta. A child with the Drake mark, a girl. She looked to be about 6 years old. Marcus stiffened. It was a subtle reaction, a microscopic tightening of the jaw, but Nathaniel saw it. He knew Marcus better than he knew himself. "You knew," Nathaniel said. His voice was deadly quiet. "I didn't know," Marcus replied, but his heartbeat sped up. Nathaniel could hear the rhythm accelerating. Thump, 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 thump. "Don't lie to me," Nathaniel snarled, stepping closer, his alpha aura flooding the room, heavy and suffocating. "You knew there was a possibility. You've been acting strange for months, sending patrols to the neutral borders. Why?" Marcus sighed, dropping his arms. He looked tired. "There were rumors, Nate, whispers from the rogue networks about a woman and a gifted child living in Ashwood Haven. I didn't want to tell you until I was sure. I didn't want to break you all over again." Ashwood Haven, Nathaniel repeated the name. It was a neutral territory, a lawless patch of forest where pack laws didn't apply, a haven for those who didn't want to be found. "Get the car," Nathaniel ordered, walking over to the wall safe hidden behind a painting of the founding alphas. "Nate, it's dangerous to go there without a guard," Marcus warned. "I said get the car. Marcus, I'm not going as an alpha. I'm going as a husband." When Marcus left, Nathaniel spun the dial of the safe. Click, click, click. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside lay a few stacks of cash, emergency documents, and a small leather-bound book. Vivian's journal. It was the only thing he had found in the wreckage of their bedroom 5 years ago. It had been shielded by a fallen beam. He had read it 1,000 times, torturing himself with her handwriting. He opened it to the very last page. For years, he had stared at the final entry, dated 2 days before the fire. "The dreams are getting worse. I feel eyes on me when I walk in the garden. I have to protect him. I have to protect the secret growing inside me. If I stay, he dies. If I leave, I die. But the bloodline cannot converge. I am sorry. My love." Nathaniel traced the words "secret growing inside me" with a trembling finger. He hadn't understood it then. He thought she was talking about her family's debt or some trouble she had gotten into. He never realized the secret was a heartbeat. He slammed the journal shut and shoved it into his pocket. "The bloodline cannot converge," he muttered to the empty room. "What did you hide from me? Vivian. And why did you think running was the only way?" He walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. The grief that had weighed him down for 5 years was evaporating, replaced by a cold, sharp determination. "I'm coming for you," he whispered, "and this time, I'm never letting you go." The drive to Ashwood Haven took 4 hours of silence. The sleek black SUV cut through the winding mountain roads, the headlights slicing through the thick fog that always seemed to blanket the neutral territory. Marcus drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Nathaniel sat in the passenger seat, staring out into the abyss of the forest. Every muscle in his body was coiled tight. "Stop here," Nathaniel commanded as the GPS signaled they were nearing the coordinates Marcus's contact had provided. "The cabin is another mile up the trail," Marcus said. "We walk. I don't want them to hear the engine." They exited the vehicle into the damp chill of the pre-dawn air. The forest here felt different, heavier, charged with unsettled magic. Nathaniel inhaled deeply. Underneath the smell of pine and decay, there it was, faint, but undeniable. "Jasmine." He didn't wait for Marcus. He moved through the trees with the silent lethality of a wolf on the prowl. As the sun began to bleed a pale gray light over the horizon, a small wooden cabin came into view. It was modest. Hidden beneath a canopy of ancient oaks, smoke curled lazily from the chimney. It looked peaceful. It looked like a home he should have been part of. Nathaniel approached the front door. He could hear movement inside. Light footsteps, the clink of a spoon against a ceramic bowl. He didn't knock. He tested the handle, unlocked. With a surge of adrenaline, Nathaniel pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was warm, smelling of oatmeal and wood smoke. In the small kitchen area, a woman stood with her back to him, stirring a pot on the stove. She wore a simple, oversized sweater and leggings, her blonde hair tied up in a messy bun, exposing the graceful curve of her neck. She froze. She didn't turn around. "You found us faster than I expected," she said. Her voice was soft, trembling slightly, but devoid of surprise. Nathaniel kicked the door shut behind him. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Look at me," he rasped. Vivian slowly turned. Seeing her face was like taking a physical blow to the chest. She was older, yes. There were fine lines of exhaustion around her eyes that hadn't been there before. She was thinner, too. But she was breathtaking. Her eyes, those mismatched jewels of green and amber, widened as they took him in. "Hello, Nathaniel," she whispered. He crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides. He didn't know if he wanted to shake her or fall to his knees and worship her. He stopped inches from her, looming over her, trapping her between his body and the kitchen counter. "You died," he said, his voice raw. "I buried an empty casket. Vivian, I mourned you every single day for 1,825 days. Vivian pressed her back against the counter, her chest heaving. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I know. I felt your pain, every bit of it." "You felt it." He let out a dark, incredulous laugh. He slammed his hands onto the counter on either side of her hips, boxing her in. "You felt it, and you let me suffer. Why?" "To keep you alive," she cried out, her composure cracking. Nathaniel lowered his head until his nose brushed against her jawline. He inhaled sharply, shuddering as her scent flooded his senses, filling the empty voids in his soul. The mate bond snapped back into place with the force of a gravity well. It was agonizingly sweet. "Give me one good reason," he growled against the sensitive skin of her neck. "Why I shouldn't take you back to the pack and lock you in my room until you remember who you belong to." Vivian gasped, her head tilting back instinctively, exposing her throat to him. It was a gesture of submission, but also of trust. Her hands came up, hovering over his chest, trembling. She wanted to touch him. He could feel the heat radiating off her palms. "Nathaniel," she breathed, her voice dropping to a sultry, desperate whisper. "You have no idea what we are dealing with. Tell me." He grazed his lips against the pulse point under her ear. He felt her heart fluttering like a trapped bird. The anger was still there, but it was losing the war against the overwhelming need to touch her. "Tell me everything, Viv." His hand moved from the counter to her waist, his large palm spanning the curve of her hip. He squeezed, his grip possessive, grounding. The fabric of her sweater was soft, but the body underneath was tense. Vivian let out a shaky sigh, her eyes fluttering shut. "The fire, it wasn't an accident. They came for me because I was pregnant, because of what I am." Nathaniel pulled back slightly, forcing himself to look at her face. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, wiping away a tear that had escaped. The touch was electric. He saw her pupils dilate, swallowing the color of her eyes. Even after 5 years, the chemistry between them was a physical force, undeniable and terrifying. "What are you?" he asked deeply. "My bloodline, it isn't just recessive. Nathaniel, it's forbidden. The council erased my family from the history books because we carry something they fear." She opened her eyes, pleading with him. "If I had stayed, they would have killed you to get to the baby. I couldn't let that happen. I loved you too much to make you a target." "So you broke me instead," he murmured, his thumb tracing the fullness of her lower lip. It was soft, trembling. He remembered the taste of that lip. He remembered the sound she made when he bit it gently. "I tried to save you," she whispered. Her hands finally landed on his chest. Clutching the lapels of his coat, she pulled him closer, her body seeking his warmth. "God, I missed you. I missed your scent. I missed your heat." The confession snapped the last of his restraint. Nathaniel crashed his mouth down on hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a reclaiming. It was 5 years of starvation and grief poured into a single moment. He devoured her, his tongue sweeping into her mouth, tasting the coffee and mint, tasting the unique essence that was purely Vivian. She made a whimper in her throat, her arms winding around his neck, her fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him down. Her body molded against his, soft curves against his hard angles. Nathaniel groaned, the sound vibrating in his chest. He pressed his hips against hers, letting her feel exactly how much he wanted her, how much he had suffered without her. His hands roamed over her back, down to her hips, pulling her flush against him. He wanted to merge with her, to burn away the years of separation with friction and heat. He kissed her jaw, her neck, nipping lightly at the sensitive cord of muscle, marking her. "Mine," he growled against her skin. "You are mine. You don't get to run again. Never again." "I don't want to run," she panted, her head falling back, breathless. "I'm so tired of running. Nate." "Mama." The small voice sliced through the heavy, heated atmosphere like a knife. Nathaniel froze. Vivian stiffened in his arms. Slowly, reluctantly, Nathaniel pulled back. His breathing was ragged, his lips swollen and wet. He looked over his shoulder. Standing in the doorway of the bedroom, clutching her plush rabbit, was the girl, Isla. She was wearing flannel pajamas, her golden curls a halo around her head. She looked from her mother, flushed and disheveled, to the large, imposing man breathing hard in their kitchen. But she didn't look scared this time. She looked curious. Vivian smoothed her sweater, her face flushing a deep crimson, but she didn't step away from Nathaniel. She kept one hand on his arm, as if anchoring him. "Isla," Vivian said softly, "come here, baby." The girl took a tentative step forward, her mismatched eyes locked onto Nathaniel. Nathaniel turned fully, Dropping to one knee so he was at eye level with the child, the movement was fluid, despite the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "Hello, Isla," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Isla tilted her head. She walked forward until she was just out of arm's reach. She sniffed the air, her nose scrunching up. "You smell like rain," she said, "and sadness." Nathaniel blinked. Sadness. "But the sadness is going away now," Isla observed. Stepping closer, she reached out a small hand and touched Nathaniel's knee. The moment her skin touched his, a shockwave went through Nathaniel. It wasn't the sexual heat of the mate bond. It was something else, a deep, resonating hum in his blood, a sense of biological imperative. Daughter, blood, legacy. "You're the man from the market," Isla said, "the one who looked at me like you knew me." "I do know you," Nathaniel choked out, covering her tiny hand with his own. His hand was massive compared to hers. I knew your mother a long time ago." Ela looked at Vivian, then back at Nathaniel. A slow, perceptive smile spread across her face. "You're the wolf in the stories, the one who howls at the moon because he lost his star." Nathaniel looked up at Vivian, shock evident on his face. Vivian offered a sad, watery smile. "I told her stories about a brave alpha who loved a girl made of moonlight. I couldn't let her grow up not knowing who her father was, even if she couldn't meet him." Nathaniel felt tears prick his eyes, a sensation he hadn't felt since he was a pup. He looked back at Isla. "I found my star," he whispered. "I found both of them." Suddenly, the front door swung open again. Marcus stood there, looking breathless, his phone in his hand. The peaceful reunion shattered instantly. "Nate," Marcus said, his voice urgent. "We have a problem. My contact at the border, he says a council enforcer team just crossed into the neutral zone. They're heading this way." Vivian's face went pale. The warmth vanished from her eyes, replaced by pure terror. "They found us. They tracked you." Nathaniel stood up, his demeanor shifting instantly from emotional father to lethal alpha. He stepped in front of Vivian and Isla, shielding them with his body. A low growl vibrated in his chest, deep and menacing. "Let them come," Nathaniel said, his gray eyes darkening to black. "They took 5 years from me. If they think they are taking anything else, they are going to learn exactly why the Drake bloodline is feared." He turned to Vivian, grabbing her hand and bringing it to his lips for a brief, hard kiss. The connection sparked between them a promise of violence against the world and devotion to each other. "Pack your things," he commanded, his voice steady. "We are leaving. We are going home." Vivian didn't argue. She nodded, squeezed his hand, and ran to the bedroom with Isla. Nathaniel turned to the door, cracking his neck. The grief was gone. The whiskey-drenched stupor was gone. The alpha was back, and he was ready to burn the world down to keep what was his. "They aren't just enforcers. Nathaniel, look at their eyes. They're soulless. They won't stop until they have Isla." "Then they die today. Marcus, keep the wheel steady. I'm going to show them what happens when you hunt a drake." "Nate, don't do it. There's too many." "Drive." The black SUV tore down the mountain pass, the engine roaring like a wounded beast. Rain had begun to fall, slashing against the windshield in violent sheets, blurring the world into streaks of gray and green. Inside the car, the air was thick with the scent of ozone and fear. Marcus drove with white-knuckled precision, drifting around tight hairpin turns. In the back seat, Vivian clutched Isla to her chest, her eyes fixed on the rear window where headlights bobbed in the distance, cutting through the gloom. Nathaniel sat in the passenger seat. He wasn't looking back. He was looking at her. He reached back, his large hand finding Vivian's knee. His fingers dug into the denim of her jeans. A grounding anchor. "Viv," he murmured, his voice cutting under the roar of the engine. "Talk to me, the bloodline, the fire. Why did you think you were poison to me?" Vivian flinched as the car hit a bump, her hand coming down to cover his on her knee. Her skin was cold, clammy. "Do you remember the stories your grandmother used to tell about the Silver Moon Pack?" "Myths," Nathaniel said, his thumb stroking the inside of her knee, a subconscious comfort. "They were wiped out a century ago. They were too powerful. They could manipulate bonds." "They weren't myths." Vivian whispered. She looked down at Isla, who was sleeping fitfully against her chest, exhaustion having claimed the child. "I am the last of them, Nathaniel. My mother hid her lineage. She taught me to hide mine. We can feel the threads that tie wolves together. We can pull them, twist them." Nathaniel's eyes darkened. "Is that what you did to me? Did you twist my bond?" "No." The denial was sharp. Vivian leaned forward, her face nearing the gap between the front seats. Her breath hitched. "With you. It was the only time I didn't use it. The bond with you was natural. It was overwhelming. But that's the problem." She swallowed hard, her eyes searching his profile. "When I got pregnant, I felt something shift in my blood. I went to the old archives in the neutral zone. I found a prophecy. The Silver Moon blood cannot mix with the Nightshade line. If they converge, the child born from that union becomes a weapon, a destroyer." Nathaniel frowned. "I don't have Nightshade blood. We are Drakes. We are Earthshakers, not Shadow Walkers." "Are you sure?" Vivian asked softly. "Think about your grandmother, Nathaniel. Think about her eyes. Violet, just like the Nightshade matriarchs." The realization hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. His grandmother, Catherine, the woman who had raised him after his parents died, she had been reclusive, powerful, and yes, her eyes had been a startling shade of violet. "Marcus," Nathaniel said, his voice hollow. "Pull over." "Nate, we can't—" "I said pull over." Marcus swerved the car off the main road onto a hidden logging trail. Killing the headlights, silence descended, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of rain on the roof. Nathaniel unbuckled his seatbelt and turned fully in his seat to face the back. He reached out, grabbing Vivian's waist, pulling her forward until she was leaning over the center console. The proximity was instant intoxication, the smell of her rain, jasmine, and fear flooded his senses. "You left," he rasped, his hand sliding up her ribcage to cup her jaw, his thumb brushing her bottom lip. "You left me because of a prophecy. You didn't trust me enough to fight it." "I was protecting you." She wept softly, leaning into his touch. She turned her face, kissing the palm of his hand, her lips soft and wet against his skin. "The council sent assassins the night of the fire. They knew, Nathaniel. They knew about the baby before I even told you. If I had stayed, they would have burned the whole pack to the ground to kill her." Nathaniel watched her lips move against his skin. The anger was there, a dull thrumming in his veins, but it was being drowned out by an agonizing tenderness. He traced the line of her throat with his other hand, feeling her pulse jump. "Marcus knew," Nathaniel said, his eyes flicking to his beta. Marcus didn't turn around. He gripped the steering wheel, staring into the dark woods. "My family, we have served the council for generations. Nate, I got the kill order on my desk 5 years ago. Target Vivian Drake. Priority immediate elimination." Nathaniel stiffened, his grip on Vivian tightening painfully. "You—" "I couldn't do it," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "So I helped her run. I staged the body. I burned the house to cover the scent trails. I broke my alpha's heart to save his mate." Silence stretched. Thick as tar, Nathaniel looked from Marcus to Vivian. Betrayal and gratitude warred in his chest. Suddenly, a soft sound broke the tension, a hum. They all looked down. Isla was awake. She wasn't looking at them. She was staring at her own hands. A faint, silver light was pulsing from her fingertips, swirling like mist. "It hurts," Isla whispered. She reached out toward Nathaniel. Isla, no, Vivian gasped, trying to pull her back. But Nathaniel didn't pull away. He let the child touch his arm. The moment her small fingers grazed the sleeve of his coat, the tension in the car evaporated. The anger Nathaniel felt toward Marcus, the burning desire to punish him, simply dissolved. It didn't disappear, but the sharp edges were smoothed over. The bond between Alpha and Beta, which had been strained to breaking point, suddenly felt reinforced, healed. Nathaniel stared at his arm, then at the girl. The sensation was like warm honey flowing through his veins. She didn't break the bond, Nathaniel whispered, looking at Vivian with wonder. She fixed it. She's not a destroyer, Vivian said, her voice trembling with hope she hadn't dared feel in years. The prophecy was a lie, or a mistranslation. She doesn't sever bonds. Nathaniel, she heals them. She's a mutation, a bridge. Nathaniel looked at his daughter, really looked at her. The mismatched eyes, the crescent moon mark. She was the most dangerous thing in the world, not because she could kill, but because she could undo the hate the council used to control them. We have to get back, Nathaniel said, his voice finding a new steel resolve. He reached out, tucking a stray curl behind Vivian's ear, his fingers lingering on the soft skin of her neck. He leaned in, pressing his forehead against hers. We go home, we fortify the pack. And then he kissed her, a slow, deep press of lips that tasted of salt and promises. And then we make them regret ever touching my family. The drive back to the Moonstone territory took another 2 hours. When they finally crossed the pack borders, dawn was breaking, bleeding crimson across the sky. But there was no welcome party. As they pulled up to the main gate, a sleek silver sedan was blocking the entrance. 3 men in long gray coats stood waiting. On their lapels pinned a silver sigil, the Council's Eye. Nathaniel stepped out of the SUV, his presence expanding instantly. He didn't look like a tired man. He looked like a king returning to claim his throne. He opened the back door, helping Vivian out, keeping her tucked firmly under his arm. Marcus stood on his other side, hand hovering near his weapon. One of the councilmen stepped forward. He held a scroll. Nathaniel Drake, the man intoned, his voice dry as dust. You are harboring a fugitive and an unregistered abomination. Nathaniel growled, the sound vibrating in the chests of everyone present. Careful with your words. You are speaking of my Luna and my daughter. The messenger smiled, a thin, cruel twisting of lips. The council is generous. We offer you a choice. Hand over the child for a study within 7 days. If you comply, your pack remains in good standing. If you refuse... The man looked at the sprawling packlands, the homes of families just waking up. If you refuse, the Moonstone Pack will be declared rogue. We will authorize a hunt. Every pack within 1,000 miles will be paid to slaughter you. Vivian made a choked sound, clutching Isla tighter. Nathaniel stepped forward, towering over the messenger. He leaned down, his face inches from the man's. Get off my land, Nathaniel whispered, terrifyingly soft. And tell your masters this if they want her. They will have to crawl over the corpse of every Drake that has ever lived. The messenger paled. Backing away, he got into his car and sped off. The timer had started. 7 days. The pack house was a fortress of tension. The news of the council's ultimatum had spread like wildfire. Whispers echoed in the hallways. Fear smelled like sour milk in the air. Nathaniel had spent the last 6 hours in the war room, barking orders, organizing patrols, and shutting down dissenters who suggested handing over the child. He was exhausted, his body running on pure adrenaline and caffeine. It was past midnight when he finally climbed the stairs to the Alpha's quarters. He paused at the door. This used to be their room. For 5 years, he had slept on the couch in his office because he couldn't bear the scent of her fading from the pillows. He opened the door. The room was dimly lit by the fireplace. Vivian was standing by the large bay window, wrapped in one of his old shirts. It was huge on her, swallowing her slender frame, the hem hitting her mid-thigh. She was looking out at the moonlit forest. She looked fragile, but when she turned, her eyes were fierce. "Is she asleep?" Nathaniel asked. Closing the door and locking it, the click of the lock felt final. It was just them now. The rest of the world was locked out. "Marcus is watching her in the guest room," Vivian said. "She's exhausted." Nathaniel walked towards her. He stopped a few feet away, just drinking her in. The firelight danced on her bare legs, cast shadows in the hollow of her throat. "You're wearing my shirt," he murmured. "I didn't have any clothes," she replied softly. "And I miss the smell, cedar and musk." Nathaniel closed the distance. The air between them crackled, heavy with 5 years of suppressed hunger. He reached out, his fingers grazing the fabric at her waist. "You have no idea," he said, his voice rough, dropping an octave, "how many times I dreamed of you standing right here, just like this." Vivian stepped closer, invading his space. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling the heavy thud of his heart through his dress shirt. She began to undo the buttons, one by one. Her fingers trembled. "I'm sorry, Nate," she whispered, looking up at him through her lashes. "I stole 5 years from us." "Don't," he growled low in his throat. He caught her wrists, stopping her hands. He pulled her flush against him. "No more apologies. I don't want your apologies. Vivian, I want you." He released her wrists and cupped her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. His gaze dropped to her mouth, dark and starving. "I want to know that you're real," he whispered against her lips. "I need to feel it." He kissed her. This wasn't like the kiss in the cabin. This was slow, deliberate, and devastatingly sensual. He tasted her deeply, his tongue tracing the seam of her lips until she opened for him. A groan vibrated in his chest as she melted against him, her body soft and yielding. Nathaniel's hands slid down her back. Finding the hem of the shirt, he slipped his hands underneath, his calloused palms skimming over the velvety skin of her lower back, her waist, her ribs. His touch was fire on her cool skin. "Nate!" she gasped, breaking the kiss to bury her face in his neck. She inhaled sharply, nuzzling against his scent gland. "Please, I need you. The bond, it hurts." "I know," he soothed, his voice thick with desire. He swept her up into his arms, carrying her toward the massive ensuite bathroom. "I've got you." Inside, he set her down on the granite vanity. He didn't turn on the lights. The moonlight spilling through the skylight was enough. He turned on the shower, letting the room fill with steam. He stepped between her legs, his hands resting heavily on her thighs, thumbs circling the sensitive skin there. The heat in the room rose, mingling with the heat of their bodies. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, leaning down to press a kiss to the hollow of her throat. He felt her pulse jump under his lips. He trailed wet, open-mouthed kisses along her collarbone, nipping lightly at her shoulder. Vivian threw her head back, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. "Make me forget," she pleaded breathlessly. "Make me forget the fear, just for tonight." Nathaniel looked up at her, his eyes black with lust. "I'm going to make you forget your own name," he promised darkly. He pulled the shirt off her shoulders, letting it pool around her waist. His gaze raked over her, worshipping every inch of skin revealed. He traced the curve of her breast with a reverence that made her shiver. "May I?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "Everything," she whispered. "Everything is yours." He leaned in, his mouth capturing hers again as his hands explored her body with a possessive familiarity. He knew her. He knew where to touch to make her gasp, where to kiss to make her knees weak. The steam swirled around them, dampening their skin, making everything slick and heightened. Nathaniel kissed her deeply, backing her against the cool mirror, the contrast of temperatures making her cry out softly. He pressed his hips into hers, the hard ridge of his desire evident against her soft belly. It was a slow, agonizing friction, a dance of reacquaintance. His hands were everywhere, stroking her back, gripping her hips, tangling in her hair. It was wet, messy, and desperate. Tears mixed with the steam on her face as the emotional dam finally broke. "I love you," she sobbed between kisses. "I never stopped." "I know." Nathaniel breathed against her wet skin. He lifted her, wrapping her legs around his waist, and carried her into the spray of the shower. Under the hot water, the last barriers washed away. There was no roughness, only a desperate, sliding need to be as close as physically possible, skin on skin, water sluicing down their backs, the sound of the shower drowning out the world. When they finally joined, it wasn't just a physical act. It was a collision of souls, a mending of the broken bond. Nathaniel held her against the tiled wall, supporting her weight completely, moving with a slow, deep rhythm that sought to erase every second of the last 5 years. "Look at me," he commanded softly, brushing wet hair from her face. Vivian opened her eyes, locking her gaze with his. In the steam and water, stripped of secrets and lies, they were just a man and a woman who had found their way back from the dead. "I am never letting you go," he vowed, punctuating each word with a thrust of his hips. "You are my breath. You are my blood." Vivian clung to him, her nails digging into his shoulders, her body arching into his. "Yours," she gasped. "Always yours." Later, much later, they lay in the massive bed, limbs tangled together under the duvet. The room was quiet. The storm outside having passed, Vivian was asleep, her head resting on Nathaniel's chest. He was awake, one arm wrapped protectively around her, staring at the ceiling. He felt peace for the first time in forever, but it was a fragile peace. Suddenly, a high-pitched scream shattered the silence. Nathaniel was out of bed before the echo faded, shifting halfway into his wolf form, claws extending. Vivian bolted upright, clutching the sheet. "Isla!" she screamed. They sprinted down the hall to the guest room. Marcus was already there, trying to restrain the thrashing child on the bed. Ila's eyes were wide open, but they were completely white. No iris, no pupil. She was arching off the mattress, screaming in a voice that sounded like 1,000 voices overlaid. The silver thread snaps. The mountain crumbles. She comes from the shadows. "Isla, baby, wake up!" Vivian cried, rushing to her side, grabbing her shoulders. Isla gasped, her body going rigid. Then, she collapsed back onto the pillows, her eyes returning to normal. She looked small and terrified. "What did you see?" Nathaniel asked, his voice tight. Isla pointed a shaking finger toward the window, toward the dark forest line. "The grandmother," Isla whispered. "She isn't sleeping in the ground." Nathaniel frowned. "My grandmother is dead. Isla. She died years ago." "Did she?" The voice came from the doorway. Nathaniel spun around, placing himself between the voice and his family. A low growl ripped from his throat. Standing in the shadows of the hallway was a figure. It was an old woman, leaning heavily on a cane made of twisted black wood. She wore a simple gray cloak, but the air around her crackled with static electricity. She stepped into the light. Her face was lined with age, etched with decades of hardship. But her eyes? Her eyes were a vibrant, shocking violet. Nathaniel felt the blood drain from his face. "Grandmother!" Catherine Nightshade, or Catherine Drake, as she had been known, smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who had been patient for a very long time. "Hello, Nathaniel?" she croaked. Her gaze shifted to Isla, softening imperceptibly. "And hello, little moon. I see you found the loose thread in the tapestry." "You're dead," Nathaniel stammered. "I buried you." "You buried a construct, a flesh puppet crafted from blood magic," Catherine said dismissively. Waving a hand, she walked into the room, limping slightly. Marcus stepped back, looking terrified. The power rolling off this old woman was immense, ancient, and heavy like the bottom of the ocean. "Why?" Vivian asked, clutching Isla. "Why hide?" Catherine stopped in the center of the room. She looked at Vivian, recognizing the silver moon features instantly. "Because I knew this day would come," Catherine said. "The council has been lying for 300 years. They told us silver moon and nightshade would bring the apocalypse." She thumped her cane on the floor. A shockwave of violet light rippled through the room, sealing the windows and doors with a magical ward. "They lied," Catherine hissed, "because they know the truth. When our bloodlines mix, we don't destroy the world." She looked at Isla, her eyes gleaming. "We rule it." Nathaniel looked at his grandmother, then at his mate, and finally at his daughter. The pieces of the puzzle were slamming together. The council didn't want to study Isla. They wanted to prevent a coup. "They gave us 7 days," Nathaniel said. Catherine let out a dry, cackling laugh. 7 days good. That is 6 days more than we need." She looked at Nathaniel, her expression hardening into the look of the alpha matriarch she once was. "Stop trembling, boy. You wanted to protect your family, then stop acting like a victim. It is time we took the fight to them. We aren't going to wait for their army." "What are we going to do?" Marcus asked from the corner. Catherine smiled, and it was a terrifying thing to behold. "We are going to rob the council, and we are going to burn their lies to ash with the truth." "Don't look at the guards. Look at me. Laugh like I just told you a joke." "I'm trying, but your hand is on your gun, darling." "That's not my gun. Viv, that's how much I want to get you out of this dress." The safe house Catherine had provided was a relic from a bygone era, filled with moth-eaten velvet and dust, but in the center of the room, laying on the ancient four-poster bed, was a dress that looked like it had been spun from liquid midnight. Vivienne ran her hand over the silk. It was a deep, shimmering blue, almost black, with a slit that ran dangerously high up the thigh. "It belonged to my mother," Nathaniel said from the doorway. He was leaning against the frame, already dressed in a tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders like a second skin. He looked devastating, dangerous. She wore it to the Grand Summit 30 years ago. Vivienne held the dress up against her body, and we're just going to walk into the council gala, the most heavily guarded event of the decade. "We aren't going as ourselves," Nathaniel pushed off the doorframe, prowling toward her. "We are going as Lord and Lady Blackwood, reclusive nobility from the Northern Territories. Marcus forged the invitations an hour ago." He stopped behind her. The air in the room shifted, becoming heavy with his scent cedar, musk, and the sharp tang of anticipation. "Put it on," he murmured, his voice dropping to that low register that made her insides clench. 10 minutes later, Vivienne stood before the cracked vanity mirror. The dress fit perfectly, hugging her curves like a lover's touch. The back was entirely open, plunging down to the base of her spine. She struggled with the delicate clasp of the diamond necklace Catherine had lent her. "Let me." Nathaniel's hands were warm on her bare shoulders. He moved her hair aside, exposing the nape of her neck. His fingers brushed against her skin, sending shivers racing down her spine. He took the necklace, fastening the clasp with surprising dexterity for a man with such large, lethal hands. But he didn't pull away. He lowered his head, his lips grazing the sensitive spot just below her ear. Vivienne gasped, her eyes fluttering shut in the mirror. "You look—" Nathaniel paused, searching for the word. He pressed a kiss to her shoulder, his hand sliding down to rest on her waist. his thumbs digging slightly into her skin. "You look like a weapon, Vivian, like something designed to bring men to their knees." "Is that a compliment?" she breathed, leaning back against his solid chest. "It's a warning," he growled softly against her neck, "because if anyone at that party looks at you the way I'm looking at you right now, I might forget the mission and tear their throat out." Vivienne turned in his arms, her hands sliding up the lapels of his jacket to fix his bow tie. She looked up at him, her mismatched eyes shining with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. "Keep your wolf on a leash, Alpha," she whispered, smoothing his collar. "Tonight, we aren't hunters. We're prey pretending to be predators." Nathaniel caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "We are drakes. We are never prey." The council headquarters was a fortress disguised as a palace. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling of the ballroom. The air smelled of expensive perfume, champagne, and the underlying, metallic scent of power. Nathaniel and Vivian moved through the crowd, arm in arm. They were a striking pair. Nathaniel, stoic and imposing, radiating an aura of cold authority. Vivian, ethereal and mysterious, clutching a flute of champagne she had no intention of drinking. "Target is 12 o'clock. A tiny earpiece buzzed. It was Marcus. He was on the other side of the room, arguing loudly with a waiter to create a distraction. "I see him," Nathaniel murmured, barely moving his lips. He leaned in close to Vivian's ear, simulating intimacy. The archivist, the bald man near the ice sculpture. "He looks nervous," Vivian observed, smiling brilliantly at a passing dignitary while whispering to Nathaniel. "He keeps checking his pocket watch." "Time to move," Nathaniel said. Suddenly, a crash echoed from the buffet tables. Marcus had accidentally knocked over a tower of champagne glasses, starting a shouting match with a high-ranking beta from the river pack. "Do you know who I am?" Marcus bellowed, playing the part of a drunk, entitled noble perfectly. Heads turned. Security guards moved toward the commotion. "Now," Nathaniel commanded. He guided Vivian swiftly toward the servants' corridor, slipping behind a heavy velvet curtain just as the guards rushed past. The noise of the party faded instantly, replaced by the cool silence of stone hallways. They moved fast, Nathaniel leading the way, his senses extended to the limit. "Left here," he signaled. They reached a heavy iron door, the archive. "It's bio-locked," Vivian hissed, examining the panel. "Blood sample required." "Good thing we came prepared." Nathaniel pulled a small vial from his pocket. It contained blood Marcus had stolen from a council guard earlier that week during a skirmish. He poured a drop onto the sensor. Beep, click, hiss. The door groaned open. They slipped inside. The room was vast, filled with rows of towering shelves packed with leather-bound books and scrolls. The smell of old paper and dried ink was overwhelming. "Where do we look?" Vivian asked, the sheer volume of information daunting. "Section 7, Nathaniel said, moving deeper into the shadows. "Catherine said the bloodline records are in the vault at the back." They found the vault. It wasn't locked. The council was so arrogant in their power they didn't believe anyone would ever get this far. Nathaniel pulled down a heavy black ledger. He flipped through the pages, scanning dates. "Here," he whispered, his finger stopping on a page dated 300 years ago, the Edict of Separation. Vivian crowded in next to him, her shoulder pressing against his arm. She read the faded script, her breath hitching. "The Silver Moon ability to unify is a direct threat to the Council's authority. A unified werewolf nation cannot be controlled. Therefore, the lie must be spread. Silver Moon and Nightshade shall be enemies. Fire and ice. If they join, the Council falls. We must fabricate the curse." "It's all here." Vivian breathed, horror dawning on her face. "They didn't separate us to save the world. They separated us to keep us weak, to keep the packs fighting each other instead of them. She grabbed another book. The Beta Suppression Technique. She grabbed another. The Manufacturing of Rogue Madness. They've been manipulating us for centuries, Nathaniel said, his voice cold with fury. Every war, every border dispute, they orchestrated it. We have to take this, Vivian said, shoving the books into the silk bag concealed under her skirt. We have to show the alphas. Nathaniel! Marcus's voice crackled in their ears. They know the biometric scanner triggered a silent alarm. You have company. Get out, and now. Red lights began to flash silently on the ceiling. The heavy iron door behind them began to close. Run! Nathaniel roared. He grabbed Vivian's hand, and they bolted. They threw themselves through the gap in the door just before it sealed shut with a deafening clang. Corridor B, Nathaniel shouted, pulling her to the right. Footsteps thundered toward them. Heavy boots, enforcers. There, a voice shouted. Open fire! Bullets chipped the stone wall inches from Vivian's head. They're using silencers. Nathaniel realized. They want to kill us quietly so the party guests don't hear. He shoved Vivian behind a stone pillar, pulling his own weapon, a high-caliber pistol loaded with standard lead, not silver. He returned fire, the shots echoing loudly in the confined space. Go, he ordered. Head for the window at the end of the hall. They sprinted. The window was 50 feet away. More guards poured out from a side passage. They were trapped. Catherine, Nathaniel yelled into his comms, now would be a good time. Outside, the sky suddenly turned a violent shade of purple. A bolt of lightning, silent and unnatural, struck the side of the building, blowing out the wall 10 feet ahead of them. Dust and debris filled the air. Jump, Nathaniel commanded. They leaped through the hole in the wall, plummeting 3 stories down into the ornamental gardens below. Nathaniel shifted mid-air, a partial shift, his bones cracking as he expanded, grabbing Vivian and twisting his body to take the impact. They hit the soft earth with a bone-jarring thud. Nathaniel groaned, rolling over. Viv? He gasped, scrambling up. Vivian was lying in the grass, clutching her side. The blue silk of her dress was turning black with blood. Nate, she wheezed, her face pale as moonlight. Nathaniel froze. The smell hit him. It wasn't just blood, it was the acrid, burning scent of sulfur and wolfsbane. Silver, he choked out. They hit you with silver. I have the book, she whispered, her hand tightening on the bag. Don't let them take it. Forget the damn book, Nathaniel roared. He scooped her up into his arms. She was terrifyingly light. The wound in her side was sizzling, the silver bullet burning through her healing factor, poisoning her blood. Stay with me, he begged, running toward the perimeter wall where the car was waiting. Stay with me. Vivian, that is an alpha command. I'm trying, she slurred, her head lolling against his shoulder. Her eyes, usually so bright, were glazing over. Marcus screeched the SUV up to the curb, the back door already open. Drive, Nathaniel screamed as he dove into the back seat. Get us to the healer now. As the car peeled away into the night, Nathaniel ripped the bow tie from his neck and pressed it against the wound on Vivian's side. His hands were covered in her blood. You promised, he whispered, his voice breaking, tears streaming down his face. You promised no more running. You don't get to die on me. Not now. Vivian's hand limp in his, her pulse thready and weak. The heist was a success, but the cost might be the only thing Nathaniel couldn't afford to pay. The pack infirmary smelled of antiseptic, sage, and the metallic tang of anxiety. It had been 6 hours since they returned, 6 hours of surgery, 6 hours of Nathaniel pacing the hallway like a caged tiger, growling at anyone who came too close. The door opened. The pack healer, an elderly woman named Martha, stepped out. She looked exhausted, wiping her hands on a towel. Nathaniel was in front of her in a blink. Is she... He couldn't finish the sentence. She is alive. Alpha, Martha said softly. We got the silver out, but the wolf's bane was potent. Her wolf is in a coma. It will take time for her to heal. She is very weak. Nathaniel let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He sagged against the wall, the adrenaline finally leaving his system, replaced by a crushing fatigue. Can I see her? Briefly, she needs rest. Nathaniel walked into the room. It was dimly lit. Vivian lay on the white sheets, looking small and pale. The IV lines and monitors beeped rhythmically, the only sound in the room. He pulled a chair to the bedside and sat down, taking her limp hand in his. He brought it to his lips, kissing her knuckles, her fingers, her palm. I'm here, he whispered into her skin. I'm right here. A commotion outside the door made him stiffen. He heard raised voices. We demand to see the Alpha. He's not to be disturbed. That was Marcus. The council has declared us rogues. They say Nathaniel attacked the gala. We need answers, not silence. Nathaniel's eyes hardened. The pack was panicking. The rot of fear was setting in. He stood up, reluctantly letting go of Vivian's hand. He smoothed her hair back one last time. Rest, my love, he murmured. I have to go be the monster they need me to be. Nathaniel burst into the waiting room, the doors banging open with enough force to crack the plaster. The arguing pack members froze. Nathaniel stood there, still wearing his blood-stained tuxedo shirt, his sleeves rolled up, revealing muscular forearms splattered with dried red. He didn't look like a diplomat. He looked like war personified. You want answers? Nathaniel's voice was low, but it carried to every corner of the room. The answer is that we are at war. The council says you kidnapped the Nightshade heir, a dissident wolf shouted. They say you're unstable. The council lies. Marcus stepped up beside Nathaniel, throwing a stack of papers onto the table. Look at it. Copies of the ledgers from the archive. They've been playing us against each other for centuries. The wolves murmured, picking up the papers. This is just paper, the dissenter sneered. The council has armies. We have, what, a fugitive Luna and a child. We have the truth, Nathaniel said. Stepping into the dissenter's space, the man shrank back, submitting to the sheer power radiating off the Alpha. And we have allies. Who? The free packs. Nathaniel declared, I made calls while the surgeons were working. The northern clans, the desert walkers. They are tired of the council's taxes and rules. They are coming, not to defend me, but to defend the freedom to choose their own mates, to choose their own destiny. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every wolf. If you want to leave, leave now. Run to the council, lick their boots, but if you stay, so you fight and we win. Silence. Then, one by one, the wolves bowed their heads, baring their necks. Submission. Loyalty. We fight, Alpha, the crowd murmured. 2 days passed. The atmosphere in the pack house shifted from panic to grim determination. Weapons were being sharpened, perimeters reinforced. In the Alpha's bedroom, the mood was different. It was a sanctuary. Nathaniel walked in, carrying a tray of soup. Vivian was sitting up in bed, propped against a mountain of pillows. Color was returning to her cheeks. You're supposed to be resting, Nathaniel chided gently, setting the tray down. I'm bored, Vivian complained, though a small smile played on her lips. And I miss Isla. Where is she? She's with Catherine and Marcus. They're testing something. Nathaniel sat on the edge of the bed. He reached out, his hand sliding under the blanket to rest on her thigh. How is the pain? Manageable, she lied. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. He moved his hand up, his fingers brushing the bandage on her side. "Don't lie to me, Viv. I can feel it through the bond." "It burns a little," she admitted, leaning into his touch. "But having you here helps. Your proximity, it soothes the wolf." Nathaniel's gaze softened. He kicked off his boots and climbed onto the bed. Maneuvering carefully so he didn't jostle her, he lay down beside her, pulling her into his arms so her back was against his chest. "Better," he murmured into her hair. "Much," she sighed, relaxing completely against him. For a long time, they just lay there, listening to the rain against the window. It was intimate in a way that had nothing to do with sex and everything to do with survival. They were two halves of a whole, finally stitched back together. "Nate." "Do you remember our honeymoon?" she asked softly. "The cabin by the lake." Nathaniel chuckled, the sound vibrating against her back. "I remember we didn't leave the bedroom for 3 days. We survived on room service and adrenaline." Vivian turned in his arms, wincing slightly. Until she was facing him, she reached up, tracing the stubble on his jaw. "I want that again, when this is over. Just us. No council. No wars." "I promise," Nathaniel said seriously. "I'll buy you the whole damn lake." He leaned in, capturing her lips in a slow, languid kiss. It was tender, tasting of broth and mint tea. He deepened it gradually, his tongue sweeping into her mouth, coaxing a moan from her throat. His hand slid down her spine, resting on her hip, squeezing gently. The heat flared between them instantly, a familiar, comforting fire. "I missed this," she whispered against his mouth. "I missed being held." "I missed holding you," he replied hoarsely. He pulled the blanket up over them, creating a cocoon. "Sleep now. I'll be here when you wake up. I'm not going anywhere." While the Alpha and Luna healed, other forces were at work. In the training grounds, Isla sat cross-legged on the grass. She was blindfolded. "Tell me what you see, little moon." Catherine's voice rasped. Isla tilted her head. Her hands were hovering over the ground, glowing with that faint silver mist. "I see threads," Isla said, her voice sounding older than her years. "Red threads connecting the warriors, blue threads for families." "Do you see anything?" "Rotten," Marcus asked, standing nervously nearby. Isla frowned. She turned her head toward the barracks. "There," she pointed. "A black thread. It smells like oil. It's connected to him." She pointed directly at a young wolf named Jax, a new recruit who was currently sparring with a partner. Marcus narrowed his eyes. "Jax, he joined 3 months ago, clean record." "The record is a lie," Catherine said, her violet eyes narrowing. "The child sees the bond, not the paper." Marcus marched across the field. Jax saw him coming and stiffened. "Beta read," Jax asked, lowering his training sword. "Who are you reporting to?" Marcus asked calmly. "I don't know what you mean, sir." "Isla says your bond is black," Marcus said, stepping closer. "She says you are tethered to the council." Jax's eyes darted to the little girl sitting on the grass. Panic flared in his scent. He dropped the sword and reached for a hidden knife in his boot. Before he could draw it, Marcus had him pinned to the ground, arm twisted behind his back. "Traitor!" Marcus roared. The other wolves gathered around, growling. "Wait!" Catherine shouted. She hobbled over, looking down at the terrified boy. "Don't kill him." "He's a spy," Marcus spat. "Yes," Catherine agreed. "And that is exactly why we need him alive. He's going to send a message to his masters, a message we dictate." She looked at Isla. "Can you twist his thread, child? Can you make him believe what we tell him?" Isla stood up, removing her blindfold. Her mismatched eyes were solemn. She walked over to the traitor. She placed her hand on his forehead. "I can fix him," she whispered. Silver light poured from her hand into the boy's head. Jax screamed. his body arching, and then he went limp. When he opened his eyes, the panic was gone. "What are your orders?" Jax asked, looking at Nathaniel, who had just arrived on the balcony overlooking the field. Nathaniel looked down, his arm wrapped around a recovering Vivian. "Tell the council we are weak," Nathaniel called down. "Tell them Vivian is dying. Tell them the pack is divided. Tell them to come to the Grand Summit to collect our surrender." He smiled, a dark wolfish grin. "Lure them into the trap." That night, in the privacy of the war room, Catherine laid out the final piece of the plan. "The summit is in 3 days," she said, pointing to a map of the neutral grounds. "All the great alphas will be there. The council will be on the dais, surrounded by their blood magic wards." "Our army can't breach those wards," Marcus pointed out. "We'll be slaughtered before we get close." "The army is a distraction," Catherine said. She looked at Nathaniel, her face incredibly old and incredibly sad. "The wards are tied to the Nightshade bloodline. The council stole the magic from my ancestors to build their throne." "So how do we break it?" Vivian asked. Catherine looked at her hands. They were trembling. "Blood calls to blood," she whispered. "To break the wards, a Nightshade must reclaim the magic, all of it." "You can do that?" Nathaniel asked. "I can." Catherine nodded. She looked up, her violet eyes shining with tears. "But the amount of power,